Here we sit just 3.5 weeks post-election, and already this country's spiraling out of control. How could we have predicted this? Oh, right. The last decade. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Throughout this election campaign, Liberal supporters were all over us to not use Pierre Poilievre's slogans, including the lost Liberal decade. And yet today, we're going to prove that that decade was lost. See, we just lived through what could be described as the worst economic decade in our country's modern history. And that's not a slogan. It's not hyperbole. It's math. It's data. And it's fact. And I want to give full credit here to journalist Tristin Hopper at the National Post for laying out the cold, hard truth in black and white in his article called Canada's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Decade. The numbers prove it. And they do. Welcome back to Bakes on Things. I'm Chris Baker, Bakes, and we are going to go through this in depth today. And we're going to start by letting me walk you through all of this. And when we're done, we're going to ask the question, who the hell let this happen anyway? All right, let's start with the most damning number of all. Since 2015, Canada's per capita GDP growth ranks dead last in the G7. You know the G7, right? They're meeting in Canada this week together, yet dead last. We fell behind Italy, behind the UK, behind France. Even while other countries struggled post-COVID, they found ways to bounce back. Canada did not. And productivity, well, Canada ranks 18th out of the 38 OECD nations. We're working more and we're producing far less. And our output per hour has actually declined since 2015. It has actually declined against that number. It's less. We have less output per hour than we did in 2015. And housing, we all know this gong show. The Liberals took power, and the cost of owning a home has now more than doubled. We now have the highest housing costs in the G7 compared to income. This has made home ownership a fantasy for millions of young Canadians and also every other Canadian too. Wages? Well, this could be part of why that housing is so unaffordable, because adjusted for inflation, most Canadians are making less than they made 10 years ago. But our tax burden? Up. Our cost of food? Up. Our debt loads? Way up. We're being squeezed from every angle and still being told everything's just fine, guys. Everything's fine. Elbows up. It's all Donald Trump and we'll take care of him. We'll take care of him for you. Elbows up. I'm going to see the Pope. I'll see you later. But the reality is that's not the case. So what did the Liberals do during this historic decline? Well, they doubled Canada's federal debt in just 10 years. And no, that's not just from COVID. See, they were running deficits long before the pandemic even showed its ugly face. And they've been running them long after. And where did the money go? It went to gimmicks like a GST tax break on the end of the year, to headlines, and to pet projects and friendly institutions like the CBC, like we talked about this week already, which raked in over $15 billion in funding this past decade, including another $400 million promised by Mark Carney. Meanwhile, Canadian retail collapsed. R.I.P. Hudson's Bay Company. Goodbye, Zeddy the Teddy. Homegrown industry withered, infrastructure stalled. The Liberal answer to all of this, and to every crisis really, was to subsidize the narratives and not actually sit there and consider solving the problems. And this circles us back to the housing crisis, which is an absolute disaster and mess right now. Because housing wasn't just neglected, it was inflamed. They burned the whole system down. Foreign investors and corporate landlords bought up supply, and government let them do this. It wasn't just immigration, though that was a big part. Building slowed, red tape piled up, middle-class Canadians lost their shot at ownership, while Liberal MPs collected real estate portfolios that are huge. Mark Carney, well, he didn't even live here, but he was advising Justin Trudeau throughout the whole thing, and he spent years in global finance and still hasn't offered a real plan to fix housing beyond vague budget promises and market speak and wants you to live in a sea can on a street with no driveways or lawns. You don't fix a housing crisis by enabling speculators. You fix it by building supply and restricting abuse of the system. And in our housing system, there's so much abuse from the civil level to the provincial level to the federal level. Abuse, abuse, abuse of all systems. So, our productivity has to be looked at as well because we have a crisis there too. Our productivity crisis is worse than you think. While the US and others have invested in tech, training, and innovation, Canada turned inward. We turtled. Regulations piled up. Investment in everything we do dried up, and businesses fled. We're burning out our workforce without even modernizing it first. And what are we told? Well, that we're doing just fine, guys. That we just need to build back better. How? When every single industry is more expensive, less efficient, and more taxed than it was 10 years ago. How? We keep hearing that we're going to stand up to Donald Trump, that we'll fight his tariffs with tariffs of our own, that we'll stand elbows up with our allies and push back against the Donald. But let me ask you, how do you lift your elbows when your own house is falling apart? We don't have the strength to lift our elbows even an inch. We have zero leverage as a country, no competitive edge. Put it in the comments. What's the competitive edge right now? There's no economic clout left. While the US is powering forward with innovation and exports, we're tripping over bureaucracy and congratulating ourselves for just keeping the lights on. How do you go to war over trade when your own economy is held together with red greens duct tape and a whole bunch of slogans? Their slogans, liberal slogans like elbows up. You don't. And every time our leaders posture like we are a global heavyweight of some sort, the world sees right through it because you can't bluff economic strength. You either have it or you don't. And right now, we don't. And it's time for our government to admit that we don't and to start doing something about it. Because they're not doing that right now. They're manipulating the media to make you believe that this is all Donald Trump. Where was the outrage during all of this decade? It was mostly coming from the conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, and then he got bashed for it. But where was the press? It was muzzled, bought, subsidized. See, the CBC got billions. Other outlets like CTV and Bell Media also got billions in media sustainability funds from the pandemic that they never had to pay back. Curious. You think you're getting a free press? You're not. You're getting a funded press. If the CBC got even a fraction less, and that money went into tax incentives for Canadian manufacturers or retailers or small businesses, how many businesses could have survived the last decade that went out of business? How many entrepreneurs could have thrived that now work in our checkout lines again? While you stew on that, I want to flip this positive because we all love the What the Maple segment. We've got a good one for you today. A rural bakery in PEI, Prince Edward Island. Smiling family, wood stove. This is a great one. And as always, Canadians do what governments can't, or won't in our case. And this week's What the Maple, it takes us to PEI, where a family-owned bakery named Hearthstone Bread Company pivoted during the pandemic. That's when they didn't bother with the supports and did something on their own. From local farmers markets to a full community delivery service that stands out today. No bailouts, no subsidies, just Canadian grit. Today, they're feeding their community, partnering with nearby farmers, and proving that if you give Canadians space to work, not red tape, they actually build empires from flour and fire. So go and check them out, support them. That's the Canada we want back. Bravo to you in Prince Edward Island. Well, we've come to close out this episode. And I wish it was a little more positive for you guys. But the reality is, we have to do something as citizens to break this pattern. Because it turns out everything that we were told was going on by the Conservatives is actually true. And now we're stuck with another Liberal government. Tristin Hopper gave us the stats before the election even happened, and we ignored it. The numbers, the proof. But it's up to us to make them mean something now. This was a decade of missed opportunity, of vanity over vision. And the worst part, the same people responsible are unfortunately still steering the ship, and there's an iceberg right ahead. No apologies, no course correction, just spin toward the iceberg. But you know what we do in Canada when something's broken like this? We fix it. Just look at PEI. We don't just rebuild, we build better than before. We demand better than before, and so we should. And to those of you who voted Liberal, this is actually not an attack against you. You were duped. You were tricked. They used every trick in the trickery book. This is more of a wake-up call. It's time to stop defending broken promises and start becoming better citizens of this country and come together again. It's time to get your hands dirty, to roll up your sleeves with small business, and to help rebuild the Canada that actually works for everyone, not just Conservatives, Liberals, NDP, whomever. Open your eyes, everyone. What you voted for wasn't real, Liberals, but it's okay. It was illusion, a story told by a party that now laughs its way to the bank while you pay for it. You believed in progress. Nobody can blame you for that. So did we. That's why we voted Conservative. But this isn't progress. It's regression. It's regression wrapped in shiny branding. And that branding is Mark Carney. So don't double down. Stand up. Join us. Speak up. Because together we can turn this ship around. But only and if we stop pretending that it's not starting to take on water. Thanks for watching.